Christine, welcome to the Content 10X podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amy.
It's great to have you here. And I just have to say that for anyone watching the video version of this, you have without doubt the best Zoom background that I've ever seen for the podcast recording that we've done. It's awesome.
Thank you. Sal, our little lizard mascot, is a firm favorite, that's for sure. Absolutely. I think people are surprised when he starts moving and then breaks into a dance. So
it's absolutely awesome. So just to kind of kick things off, could you just explain, I guess, a little bit more about Salamandra, what you guys do and your role as well within the agency?
Yeah, sure. So Salamandra UK, we call ourselves visual problem solvers. So we focus on B2B animation. So unlike this sort of, the Peppa Pigs or the Disneys or the, Pixar's who do like big movies or series, we do animation that works for business to help convey complex messages. And that can be all sorts of different types of animation. It can be, 2D, it can be 3D. We work in AR and VR, stop motion graphics, and we even mix it up with live film footage. So, for example, in business, you could have talking heads, which is quite common, but we take it a step further, and we could green screen the people doing the talking heads, and you could have a live volcano going on behind if you wanted to. We can add motion graphics next to the person to animate what the words or the sense of what they're saying, just to add some excitement and help to understand and convey those complex messages. And it's animation is used in so many different ways for business, whether it's a corporate explainer or a TV ad or online advertising for your email signature, your presentations, your website, so many different applications. And I just felt that it was an incredible way to convey those complex messages in a way that can be, really work for your target audience. Because we can do, photorealistic, we can do CGI, we can do, painterly storytelling kind of stuff, or, quite scientific, quite, we work in about 18 different industries, including things like pharmaceutical and engineering and IT, and some of the stuff, or even, for example, finance, which is where they talk about really complex products. But when you visualize those, whether using abstract or, storytelling or sort of character animation, it just helps to really cement what it is that you're trying to convey. So I started Salamandra, nearly 8 years ago now. It'll be 8 years in June, to help business get those messages across and make them memorable and make them shareable, etc. And at that time, it was still kind of not unknown, but not that common. Now it's a lot more common, I think, and more applications are being found, whether it's gamifying your message or, using AR, VR. And with those, with AR, for example, you can do off print or off screen. So again, there's lots of different platforms. I always said that, we could animate anything, even animating something onto a rocket. And in fact, we've got a client in Scotland who deals in satellites. So, our dream came true in that sense. But so it's really versatile, and I started it because I wanted to help business to, be more exciting about how they express themselves and make it simpler. The other thing which I really love about animation actually is that it can be genderless and culturaless, and you can cover, taboo subjects or sensitive subjects or obviously complex subjects, and all of those lend themselves to animation. People often think animation, they think cartoons or, something that's funny. But you'd be surprised how it can convey any emotion you like, from pathos to, something very, it can be funny, it can be sad, it can be instructional. It's great for education. It's great for, for example, we found that we've got clients in HR or for induction or for children or adult education. It's just so much better than reading. We take in, 10% of what we read and 90% of what we watch. So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so engaging, so many different dimensions to it. It's really interesting because as you were explaining, the different types of animations you create and the businesses you work with, I was thinking to myself how, in the line of work that I work in content marketing, we're often creating content for businesses for marketing purposes to put the word out to the world about what they do. And I was thinking how I'm sure that you must create lots of content for internal purposes, like you said as well, like training and internal communications and things like that, as well as the external content that goes out from them to the rest of the world, because it's highly useful as instructional, informative content, as well as from a marketing perspective, isn't it? It's very versatile.
Definitely. And to your point about sort of repurposing, for example, if you take a corporate explainer, say it's 60 seconds or 90 seconds, and that's kind of the umbrella thing about the business, about the services, it gives you the whole sort of encapsulates what it is that you do. So with that 60-second animation, and it is, it's a lot of work. It's not sort of, it takes, 4 to 6 weeks. It takes a group of people to do it. It's, quite labor intensive, but it's very bespoke. We do all sorts of stuff. We research your industry, your competitors, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of thinking behind that. But with that, you could repurpose it for, as I say, for your website, for your sales presentation, for your induction. We can, for example, say you've got, 5 different services. We can take those elements out, and either as static that you can then repurpose for your marketing collateral, or as little GIFs, short little animations that can be used for social media, for example, or can be used in an electronic white paper. Or, we're always very keen to encourage our clients to repurpose whatever we create. And to really sort of sweat that asset and get as much return on investment as you can. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and it's nice when you can be uniform about that message or the look and feel of that message, and use that throughout your marketing. We use, for example, it's become really popular actually to create avatars, and that can be of the people that we've got on our website. We've got our team as avatars. In fact, there's one clip where we're all dancing, which is quite fun. But those avatars can be used again in lots of different ways. We created an avatar for somebody in the furniture, sort of bespoke furniture industry, where it's the avatar of the owner, and he's actually on the website sort of pointing and sort of commenting on wherever you go on the website, a little bit like, well, a much nicer version of do you remember the Microsoft paperclip, where
Yes.
it give you instructions? That sort of idea, but it's an avatar of him.
Yeah.
So you can personalize your brand a little bit like Sal, our lizard. So it's on multi-level. It's not just what you see, but the sort of tone of voice as well can come across with whatever you create. But absolutely, I think repurposing is key. I mean, every marketing budget is finite at the end of the day, and we get more and more pressure to have that return on investment. So to your point, the more we can repurpose, the better, really.
Yeah. Do you think is it quite often when businesses perhaps have a topic that they are worried is a little bit dry, like a white paper or some research or things like that as well, and they're wondering how they can bring some kind of pizzazz to the message and some creativity and a bit of fun, and then a great solution is to potentially get some of the key points or messages or help land a certain research finding through animation? Is that the kind of work that you can do when you're trying to repurpose research and white papers and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. We've done that, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry. We've done a very complex sort of findings and research, and illustrated that. And that's obviously where we sort of lean on the client quite a bit to explain to us what it is that we're discussing, and what the product is, or what the finding is, or what the piece of science is. Because to do any kind of narrative, we've got to understand it. So once we've got it in our heads, okay, right, that's what it does, got it, then you can start visualizing it and creating something that can illustrate that. And then once you've, the before and after is extraordinary. I mean, when you read a piece of very complex, science, and then you see the visual side of that, it's, even for a non-scientific person, it's just so much clearer. I mean, not always 100%, because sometimes there's so much, formulas and stuff like that, which goes right over my head. But yeah, it really, it's lovely to see that coming to life, actually. And the great thing as well is because we are so careful about how we take a client through a project like that. They often come back and say, God, how did you know what was in my head? You hit it on the nail, kind of thing. But we do have quite a process. I actually wrote a book called Destination Animation, and it's really, the subtitle is How Smart Marketeers Convey Complex Messages Memorably. And the reason I wrote the book, I actually wrote it over COVID lockdown, was because so many people ask us, how do you do it, and what's the process, and how do I know what I want, and how do I brief, and how do I pick the right agency, etc. So the book really takes you through, hence the name Destination Animation, the whole sort of journey, if you like, and we do it a bit like an underground map, and show how at every point the client sort of signs it off. And I think it's quite important to have that comfort, because a lot of marketeers, haven't worked in this field and don't really understand where it starts and ends, and what their responsibilities are, etc., and what's the agency's responsibility, and how to sort of brief and then to sort of, manage that whole project. So we've hopefully made it quite easy to follow, and it's available on Amazon or Kindle if you want. But it's also been said that it's a good book if you're studying animation, or you're a lecturer in it, because the animation that we do for business is quite different and on different platforms to the animation that's done through major movies, and it's a completely different approach. Whereas we do short, sharp projects that are beginning and end quite cohesively and quite fast. In sort of big movie industry, you might be, as an animator, you might be working on 2 or 3 minutes of something like The Incredibles over 2 years. So it's really quite different, and it's a different set of skills, I think, different platforms that you need.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So when you're working on creating an animation, and then looking at how you can help clients make the most of the investment in that animation, and having that asset that they can now use. And of course, there'll be their own like platform, like putting it on their website and things like that. But I'm sure you're also looking at ways that you can, repurpose the animation itself to be suitable for social media platforms and places like that. So is there a process that you go through to try and make sure that it can be used multi-platform, and have more uses than perhaps like the key use that the client might come to you and talk about, probably their website?
Well, that's a conversation we have at the start, and depending on what the clients want, because obviously for social media, it's a different shape. So it's normally in a square shape.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, that would be a sort of adaptation, if you like, but it's not too hard to do. And if, for example, they want certain assets taken out, flat assets that can be repurposed for collateral, then again, if we know up front, it's much easier to design around that.
Yeah.
If they don't know up front and they decide later, we can always work around that, or redraw it, or what have you. But absolutely, it's for different platforms. Obviously, you need different resolutions. For example, if you're doing a TV advert, and we partner up with Sky AdSmart, which is amazing. They do very, very geographically bespoke and demographically bespoke campaigns. But again, for TV, it's again a different resolution, you have to save it in different ways, and have to do certain things to the piece to make it able to go onto TV. And the same, for example, we've done animations for our local cinema in Windsor, and it's an animation that starts before every movie is shown. And again, that's a widescreen animation, so we had to design it to that and to the right sort of pixel size. And we've also done some really, really big conference animations on multi-screens. The biggest one we did was in Monaco. It was 18 screens, including the ceiling, the stage,
Wow.
walls, down the floors, etc. And they all had to sort of talk to each other, if you like, so that the animation had to flow from one screen to the other. And of course, because there were certain shapes, we had to make sure that, and sizes, some of them were really quite large, that then it's created to that spec, because otherwise it will be horrible and very pixelated, and won't fit the actuals, because some of them are projection mapped as well. So again, it's horses for courses. So that's why we have quite a robust briefing session. And you're quite right, sometimes clients are not sure yet what they want, because they're not sure of the different sort of roles that the animation can play. So and that's up to us really to say, well, have you considered this, or will you be using it in that? But even as a standalone, say, 60-second animation, it can be a way to get everybody in the business to, in a snap, be able to convey what the company does, for example. Because how often do we hear people working in the same company but describing it in different ways? Whereas if you do that as part of your induction every time somebody comes in, or as part of your monthly meeting, then it kind of, that whole sort of way to explain it becomes quite uniform. And that's quite important in marketing, I think. If everyone describes what the company does in the same way, I think the message becomes, the more repetition and uniformity, the more sort of builds trust, doesn't it? So
yeah,
quite important.
yeah, I completely agree with you. It's funny. One of the first marketing assets that I created at Content 10x was, not me personally, but my team created, was a animation, and not quite, I think, to the standard that you guys work to, but it was a really, straight off on my list of things to do in terms of our marketing, in terms of in ourselves in the marketplace, explaining to people what we do and helping other people to explain what we do. It was to create an animation, and it took a long time for us to do that, because what a member of my creative team is, he's very skilled in creating animations, but he was doing it as a kind of side of desk job, client work first. And then when you've got some downtime from any client work, here's the brief, create this Content 10x, explain a video. And, it was a good kind of 6 months in the making, I think, because it was, just every frame took so long to do. And so it was so complicated, but it was really good because we were really proud when we launched it. And I really felt like it explained what we did well, and it was on our homepage and on like YouTube and Facebook, and pinned on Twitter, and all the kind of places that I just always thought to myself, if there's one thing that people do, if they could just watch a short, engaging animation that just explains what we do, then it that would be great. And I think it was, a really, really good move. And we had it for years. And then in the last year or so, we kind of did an updated one because we rebranded and things like that. And it had all our old branding all over it. So we had to rebrand. But yeah, they're so powerful, aren't they? And it's really interesting what you said about just how important it is that you work in the early stages with knowing exactly what they're going to be used for, because it makes such a difference in terms of how you create. Because I always say that repurposing and maximizing content can't start at the point at which you've created something and then you stand there and you scratch your head and you look at it and you think, what should we do with it now? You have to have planned that in advance, don't you? And it sounds like you're creating for so much different types of media, when you were saying about TV screens and cinema screens and multi-screen, as well as, I'm sure, the small screen. So is it almost, does it present almost a different project when you're thinking about the very small screen, like the mobile phone screen, and these animations going onto TikTok or Instagram, and then also thinking about something like a cinema screen or multi-screen experience? Is there a crossover there, or is that quite different?
But the multi-screens, you have to be different because every screen is doing something else. So you wouldn't be able to take a normal animation and put it onto multi-screens unless you just want a repetition of the same thing. But a standard corporate explainer can be used in lots of different ways. It can, in its full entirety, be used in social media. You can add it to your email signature, for example. You can, that's an easy thing to do. And you've got there's your billboard, if you like, for every time you send out an email. But it does depend. I mean, every platform is slightly different. For example, we do quite a lot of work in AR and more so in VR. And again, that's quite different again, but it's why you're using it. What's the purpose for it? So AR might be to make something come out of you, or now you can actually go into the screen with AR, which is really exciting, like a doll's house effect. So, again, you've got to understand, we try and encourage clients to not do it just for a gimmicky purpose, but just it's got to have some kind of logical use or purpose to make it worthwhile. It's got to add value. You also have to ask, well, so what? So it's got to have a so what. And the same with VR. VR is amazing, and all enveloping experience. But if you're going to be doing it for your business, you've got to again say, well, who's going to be using it, how you're going to be using it, etc. For example, now that headsets are becoming more and more affordable, if you've got, for example, either you can't go to an expo because of COVID, for example, or you can't do an event, you could actually send a headset to each of your VIP clients, a handful of those clients, and have a whole experience. And also, nowadays with VR, you could have a virtual expo stand, you could have a virtual demonstration of various demo rooms, and have avatars of your team coming on board, showcasing what it is that you're doing. And then you could have a sales team there as well, and actually do the sale online in virtual environments. So it's becoming, very, very versatile. The same for education. Education is amazing. I wish I was a kid nowadays. I mean, you could learn stuff in such a great way, and it allows for different types of, neuro learning, because thank God we're all becoming a lot more aware of the neurodiversity. Not everybody learns in the same way. Apparently, the majority of us are visual learners, but not everybody, for example. So, it's great to sort of be able to have technology help with that, to make sure that you're touching every kind of learner and the way people like to absorb stuff. But we're also tethered to our phones and to our computers and tablets and stuff. I'm sure that's, you get the majority of people using visual and audio is really important as well. So most of the work that we do has got audio, whether it's voiceovers or music, and that adds to the whole the flavor of the message and the narrative, etc. So and we've done voiceovers in so many languages. And another thing is, if you are thinking of doing anything international with various different languages, again, this is something that we sort of cover in the brief, because when you've got, say, a text, because we help to write the script, clients give us the bullet points and we create the script, because we're very good at condensing information. 1 minute animation, you've got about 90 to 100 words to play with, which is very little, but we're very good at condensing that and then adding everything else around on the animation and sound effects and what have you. But if you're doing it in various languages, for example, if you're working in Japanese or Russian or even German, then you have to, the English version, if you're using the same animation, needs to be a lot shorter, because the minute you start translating, it becomes longer and longer and longer. And so the voiceover has to talk a lot faster.
Yeah.
Or you've got to have gaps in the sort of the actual narrative to allow that. But these are all things that we advise our clients when we first sort of have that initial brief.
Yeah, I guess that's such a good point that you mentioned about having different languages, because that's a real bonus of the versatility of animation, isn't it? That you can do that. It sets itself apart from having actors and having a different type of video where you would need to kind of dub in or have some other workaround. That doesn't work the same as just having a great animation that can have a voiceover in. And like you said, any language to a point, but I'd never thought about that it may take a very different amount of time to convey that script in Japanese than English or Spanish or something like that. So that's really interesting.
We had a project in Hong Kong, actually, that they wanted translation to Japanese. And we had to really, and that was at the last minute. We only told later, so it was a bit of a nightmare, because we had to sort of stretch the content to make it work, and then the voiceover artist had to sort of speak fast, but without being too fast, because you can't speak too fast, because people it's going to be too much. So we had to sort of magic something out of it. It was fine, and the client loved it, and it worked really well. But that was a bit of a headache.
Bit of a tricky one. What would you say? Is there a standout example that you can think of a business that you've worked with that had just a really good example of investing in a wonderful animation and then really kind of maximizing it in lots of different ways? You've already touched on loads of different ways already, including small things like email signature, through to kind of bigger things. But is there a good example that you can think of just a specific client and what they did to really maximize the animation?
Yeah, a lovely client of ours called Millwood Fire Services. They are fire prevention company, and they're a family-led company. So they, it's been in the family for years. So what we discovered differentiated them from the competition is that they didn't do the whole sort of shock tactic of, you have to have this fire safety or you'll burn down kind of thing. Their message was very much prevention and care and all that kind of stuff, and the fact they're family owned. And so, we, through the whole sort of briefing process, we created an animation. We've actually done quite a few with them, but the first animation with them was this whole umbrella piece about, family run business, and it's all about safety and nurture and taking care of, your business or your family or what have you. We obviously created the animation, we created the characters, and the characters were, although we'd met one person in the business, we hadn't met the others, but apparently when we created the characters, they were very similar to the family members, which is
that's funny.
fortuitous. It wasn't, we weren't aiming to go for that, but it just worked out that way. And then we repurposed a lot of the assets themselves to populate along the website, and along their other collateral, etc. And that we did quite a bit of work with them with regards to branding and marketing material for them around what we created and on the website, etc. And they very kindly, I think about six months later, they attributed their best ever quarter to the fact that they had this incredible persona and look and feel and the whole tone of voice of their company. They're a very caring company. They nurture young people into the business. It's sort of the whole ethos was very strong, and they've gone from strength to strength. We've done a number of animations with them, and they repurpose them really well. They use them on social media. They use them on various postings. And on their sort of different platforms and stuff. And they use it also for induction for their apprentices and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that worked really, really well. And it was really lovely that their message really stood out in their industry, because it was one, the tone was about prevention and care rather than sort of, shock and fear and all that kind of stuff. So that was really cool.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting project to work on and really rewarding as well. And
yes,
it must have been great that it was such a worthwhile cause, and that you then witnessed them do so much with the outputs that you created as well. So that's awesome.
And when they told me in confidence that the turnover, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool.
That's brilliant.
So they did really well.
Yeah, I know, that just makes it so much more rewarding for the work that you and your team do as well, isn't it? So that's awesome. For anyone who's been listening along and really enjoying hearing all about the power of animations and how it can work for businesses, what would you give as kind of one final just piece of advice for getting started if you've never dipped your toe in, apart from obviously getting a copy of your book and reading your book, which of course everyone should do, but what like one kind of, okay, you're inspired and you're thinking that you're going to take a step into the world of animation for content for your business, what would be a great just starter tip to get going with that?
Well, I think it would be, think about who's your target audience or your target audiences, because often there's more than one. What are their pain points? What are you fixing in those pain points? And what do you want to illustrate of those fixing those pain points in the animation? And what is the call to action? So the call to action could be just brand awareness. It could be, fill in this form or follow us on X, or it be all sorts of things. It would phone us up or go to a website, whatever the case is, because those help us to understand what the content might be when we understand who we're talking to. And also we often find that depending on where the stages of the business is in, they may not have, for example, brand guidelines, and we often ask for those. If they don't have them, we can create them for them as a service, and I think it's really important to have that, because I do think that a brand is such an important investment, but it's also a costly one, and so it's really important that you nurture that and you sort of make sure that you take care of it, and that it stays uniform in whatever format that you advertise yourself. So I'd say start with your target audiences, and think about what do you want them to do once they've seen this animation. That's really important. And it can be a whole number of things, because depending where you're showing it as well. I mean, it could be in a booth at an expo. It could be, and again, we can repurpose things, because you can top and tail things in different ways. We can add things, if your company changes or people change or service changes, an animation can be re-edited and recreated in segments, as opposed to if you've got video, then you've got to get the same environment, the same talent, the same light, the same sort of circumstances as you had the first time you filmed. But with animation, you can add on all sorts of things. I mean, a lot of the car manufacturers they might do a wonderful shoot in Italy with all these windy roads and stuff, and then realize that they've changed the bumper of the car. Well, they're not going to do the shoot again because that costs far too much money. So they get people like us to go and change the bumper on the CGI version and of that part of the film. And so if we can do that to film, we can certainly do that to animation. So it makes it more versatile down the line.
Yeah, it's another point of the versatility, isn't it? We were talking about the multi-language aspects and things like that, but of course, going back and editing things and things like that, it's just another really beneficial aspect to the longevity of the content you've created and the investment that you've made, because there's just you can just keep on working with it, can't you? This has been a really fascinating conversation, actually, and really interesting, and I think it will have really inspired and opened up a lot of people's eyes towards the world of animation, and as you said at the start, like B2B animation as well. It's a whole different ball game, and you guys are really leading the way with that. So thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. So really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic conversation. Where would you like people to go? We've mentioned your book, and I'll make sure that we put links to go and grab a copy on Amazon within our show notes. But is there any where that you would like people to particularly go or connect with you after listening to this show?
Yes, certainly. They can obviously go on our website, which is salamandra.uk, or they can follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter, Instagram. They can link up with me on LinkedIn, Christine MacKay. It'd be lovely to hear from your listeners. And I've really enjoyed this too. Thank you for inviting me on your show, Amy. It's great.
No, it's been fantastic. And to everybody who's just kind of listening now on the audio version of the show, I really recommend jump over to our YouTube channel and have a look at the video version, so you can see the awesome animated background that Christine has had throughout the call as well, because that's been fab. So yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. Awesome conversation, and we'll put the link so everyone can connect with you after the show. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amy. Take care. Bye.